That's good. Got close to killing a man.
No, how close have I gotten? I was just trying to work out whether there was some kind of something that I could then relatively turn into.
Have you ever shot a bow and arrow?
Yes.
I don't think I have, so that's pretty cool. I'd love to have a bow and arrow. Don't know why. Don't know what I'd use it for. Just shooting at targets, I guess. Crossbow of some sort, perhaps.
Why was I thinking about crossbows recently?
There are a lot of reasons to think about crossbows. They're pretty cool.
Yeah. I must have been watching something, and it clearly functioned as an effective weapon.
Have you seen...
On that occasion.
Yeah. Have you seen... I'm not going to be able to remember the name of it. It's the show about like England in the Dark Ages, and it's the guy's name is Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
I am Uhtred, son of Uhtred.
It's a good show. No idea what it's called. One of the few shows produced in the last several years that I have watched. Pretty good. Pretty good. Forget what it's called. It's like King Alfred's in it. Alfred the Great.
Oh.
It's a good show. That's what I'm saying. Pretty good show.
I've never heard of this.
God, what's it called? Whatever. Look it up. Good show. Maybe that was why you're thinking of it. Probably not if you don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I've been watching I've watched some of the new episodes of the new series of the adaptation of the movie Snowpiercer that Netflix made.
Oh, they made a show?
Yeah.
Really? I haven't even seen the movie. I know the spoiler, though, which is...
Oh, right. There's a polar bear.
It's a polar bear. There's a damn polar bear driving this train. Is it good?
I'm enjoying it. Yeah. It doesn't. I mean, like the movie's kind of surreal, and the TV show has to make it a functioning world to some extent.
Sure.
More so than the movie is compelled to have to.
Yeah.
There's a bit less weird.
Is it? It's kind of like class politics plays a role, right? In the movie?
Yeah.
Does it in the show?
Yes.
Yeah, lovely.
Yes. Yeah, they have a revolution.
Oh, that's cool.
And
Hopefully successful.
Yeah, well, so far, so good. Yeah.
I've seen.
Yeah, what the revolutionary politics of it like? I suppose it's good. I mean, it's fun, right? It's set on a train, right? So like the classes are the literal train classes, but also
cool.
they mirror onto like wealth in terms of like who can buy a ticket and what they can pay and kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, lovely.
They have a violent revolution.
Well, that's good.
And overthrow the system.
Overthrow the train?
Overthrow the leadership of the train and attempt to instill a democratic government. And then automatically have to institute martial law.
Oh. Such as with all revolutions. I know you said there was taboo to reference other podcasts, but I'm going to reference all-time classic podcast, Mike Duncan's Revolutions, all-time classic.
Chappa.
Sorry. Exactly. And just the general thesis that I feel like he's moving towards, which is that all revolutions ultimately are kind of disasters and maybe I should say tragedies, right? I still hold out hope that the Russian Revolution that he's on now is going to end up well. I don't know. Hopefully we'll see if the working class can pull through.
He writes a good story, doesn't he? He weaves a good yarn.
He weaves a damn good yarn.
Where does he get these ideas from?
yeah, exactly. Damn good yarn. That's what I'll say. What else is new, Dan? How are you? How are things?
I'm all right. Been back at work this week after being off for a while. I suppose it's nice to have something to do.
Back to being a wage slave
for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's about it.
It's hard work, isn't it?
Yeah. Trying to...
But I'm carrying on.
Carrying on. That's all we can ask for, I think, right now. To the royal listener, I'm reporting from beyond the grave. Because as you know, last episode, Dan, I said that if the weather got worse, I was going to kill myself. And the cold is back. The weather is horrible again. So I'm dead. I have offed myself, so I am here returning from the grave to bring you this podcast.
I'm glad you could join me.
Yeah, of course. Of course. It's time to record. What are we going to do? Miss an episode? Weather sucks again.
I hadn't noticed. Is it cold?
Oh, it's cold.
Colder than it was?
It's cold, yeah. I mean, a week ago it was like sunny and beautiful.
Yeah.
Now it's just
Yeah.
It's back. Broad beans, though, looking great.
Still alive.
Still alive. Yeah, very hardy plant. I'm going to say that a lot. Very impressed.
We got given some tomatoes.
Oh, yeah.
So now we've just got to keep those alive.
They're inside?
No.
No.
So,
well.
we'll see.
Good luck.
They're not totally exposed.
Yeah. I think my tomatoes back home survived a couple frosts, I think. But it would have just been at night. Wouldn't have been during the day or anything, so I'm not sure. I imagine they don't love it. We'll see.
We'll find out.
We'll find out.
Yeah. I killed quite a lot of tomatoes last year from overwatering them. So,
That'll happen.
yeah.
What are you going to do? I have no idea how to grow tomatoes out here. Back home, it's just like, plant it whenever, drop a tomato, it'll grow. We find like 1,000 tomatoes. Here, it's like, oh, God, I have no idea.
Yeah, you were saying there's not really a season for it. It's just all the time.
Yeah.
Just like
It's just put some
permanent
in.
glut of tomatoes.
Exactly, yeah. Why not? Make a lot of
It's
bruschetta.
not water intensive.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to be self-sufficient in tomatoes. Gonna have to learn to make my preserves or
I was
something.
going to say, how many tomatoes are you eating?
Quite a lot. I feel like they're a staple.
I used to hate tomatoes. Still kind of suspicious of them when they're on their own, but it's a good fruit. I think it's a fruit. Whatever it is, it's good. I enjoy it. Not anywhere near the S tier of my vegetables, though.
Okay.
Potato, of course, S tier. That might be the only S tier one. Broccoli's up there. Broccoli's very, very good. That might be it. I don't know. It's probably like C tier tomatoes. I don't know. B tier, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I don't eat fresh tomatoes, but like from a tin, they are like the staple of like
Sure.
most cooking.
Yeah.
And in that sense,
Yeah.
I suppose they have to count. Although if they're a vegetable, if they're a fruit rather, who knows?
That's true.
Who
I feel
knows?
like you couldn't tier list fruit and put tomatoes near the top. That would be psychopathic to do that. Put it above a mango. My goodness.
What a world! What a world!
What a world. Yeah, tune in to episode 21 where we rate our vegetables.
Yeah. Is that what we're doing now?
What are we doing now? Episode 20. We did it. We survived. We survived until episode 20.
Against all the odds.
Against all the odds.
adversity.
So, well, I guess actually, technically, I didn't. But here I am.
The weather actually got you.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if anything was going to get anybody, either of us in this podcast, it was going to be the weather, wasn't
It was
it?
absolutely always going to be the weather. 20 episodes, 20 fun-filled episodes. You know what, Dan? Let's go ahead and look back on those episodes. Let's go ahead and have another clip show.
Yeah, that's right, folks. We've decided we've found any excuse not to have to do any reading.
We can promise you that we're reading something really big for next week, though. It's huge. It could be the biggest thing we've ever written. Dan, what are we
not
going to read?
decided yet.
I think we're slowly coming around to the idea of maybe having some themes, perhaps, in the next 10 episodes. Some things we can work around. Because I think we were doing a little bit of hindsight bias with the last 10 episodes. Perhaps there were some themes. We'll get to that. But I think it'd be cool. Maybe do a little ecology. As a little sneak peek for our dear listeners for the next 10, but we'll see. Who knows?
It'll be fun. It'll be fun. It's definitely
It'll be
a
fun.
blind spot of ours so far. I mean,
So
we've got
far.
a lot of blind spots. We've
Yeah.
only done 20 episodes. Then we forgive ourselves.
Yeah.
Um,
We'll be reading John Bellamy Foster's treatise on the broadbean.
But it has been, I mean, we observed this at episode 10, right? But it has been the case that, like, one thing leads into another and you find something, you follow a theme and chase it out kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And the same has happened this time.
Same as happened this
To
time.
some extent. To some extent.
To an extent. I mean, again, we're kind of looking back and putting these things on them. God damn it, what is it? Oh, here it is. We are kind of doing a little bit of hindsight bias with maybe connecting these, maybe not though. So I'll just go ahead. Oh, God damn it, where did I write this down? Not there. And let's take a stroll down memory lane. For the last 10 weeks, I guess maybe 9 weeks, still. Jesus Christ, 9
Hasn't
weeks.
it flown by?
It has absolutely flown by. It's funny to think
It's
that I
been
was
the
doing
only thing we've been doing.
exactly. I was gonna say like 9 weeks ago I was probably doing the exact same thing. Jesus,
Well, 9 months ago.
9 months ago. My God. So we started, Dan, episode 11. I'm just gonna rush through them real quick. We did Hillary Putnam, I believe, on the corroboration of theories. I believe that's what it was called.
Tried to explain the title of the name of the podcast.
Attempted to. We'll attempt to again
Maybe we'll
today.
do a bit more of that.
So who knows? Not really in chronological order, but kind of in chronological order. We did Cybernetic Revolutionaries, Eden Medina, fantastic. All about Stafford Beer and Chile and Allende and that whole pizzazz. Perhaps, I was going to say Chilean Revolution. You could call it a revolution, I suppose. Would you use that terminology? I mean, they were just elected, I guess, but...
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it? It was certainly like an effort at a revolutionary change.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think.
Yeah.
I think there was certainly motivation behind it,
Mm.
which was revolutionary in nature.
And there was definitely a counter-revolution.
There certainly was a counter-revolution,
So
indeed.
maybe that's what we should be defining revolutions by. Then we got into People's Republic of Walmart. Lee Phillips and Michael Rozowski, I believe was his name, something like that. Then we hopped on into Reinhard Rupp's German Revolution. It's very, very good. Then we did Classes, Process, and Relationship. Returning guest Ellen Meeksons Wood. And sprinkled in there we did chapters 3 and 4 from
Marxism and politics.
Marxism and Politics. Ed Miliband. I always get confused on that.
One of that bunch.
Oh no, we have Ralph Miliband. See, jeez, not Ed Miliband. Jesus. And then we also started and didn't get very far. We're still going on our capital reading thing. And so, wow, what a great 9 weeks it's been, Dan. What a lovely 9 weeks. I suppose if we're going to look back and try and pull out some themes from things that we've perhaps learned, the first thing that stuck out to me, I suppose, was prevalence, at least in those kind of first half of the episodes, about the relationship between, like, science to social, like, to our society, I suppose. The relationship that science has to our society, the relationship that science has to Marxism, to social change, but also kind of like technocracy. And I know that you were saying about, like, when we want to use science to plan a new society, the relationship between, like, top-down planning versus bottom-up, and the relationship that just working class people have to scientists, I suppose. If any of you are on Twitter in the past week, what's his name? MC Hammer has been getting into some fights with people on Twitter, which has been very funny, for making the bold claim that science is perhaps socially driven and not as objective as we might think. So it was kind of the beginning, I suppose, episode 11 with our Hillary Putnam, I suppose. Just ideas.
Yeah, I'm glad that we got around to doing that episode and did it when we did. And it was, yeah, as I was reflecting on the whole collection of episodes that we've done over the last 10. What sort of resonated in my head, or what stuck in my head, was this, that we'd sort of like laid out this idea of the auxiliary statement, and sort of like decided that it might have some bearing on how we might decide to develop theory in some way, or at least how we might decide to analyze the things that we read, and sort of, or how we might go about trying to work out what kind of political ideas and doctrines we might like to hold to, and which ones we came across that we might decide to jettison, kind of thing. And I feel like, for me anyway, we kind of like proposed that idea, and then I never really thought about it again.
Yeah,
maybe I was
same.
just relieved that it was settled, at least to the extent that we'd made some go at explaining why we desperately scrabbled together that name for the podcast when we did.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, I guess it's almost two different questions, right? I mean, because the idea of the auxiliary statement is like, what can you say that with like the intent of keeping that theory in place, right? But that perhaps doesn't necessarily. Well, I don't know. I don't really know what I'm saying, but I think that it's something different as opposed to like side theories to Marxism, maybe, because what you said that a couple days ago, and it's really got me thinking. I was thinking about it a lot, just like walking around today, about like what these things are, perhaps that would be central to like a Marxist project, and what again is just like peripheral. And I think it was good that we read the Ellen Meeksons Wood, right? Because class has to be one of those things. I mean, if there's no such thing as class, where does that leave us?
Yeah. I think if we'd use that sort of terminology in thinking about, we can continue to do that going forward in thinking about class. Obviously, we've touched on class like almost permanently throughout this entire the entire podcast, really. But
Sure.
like all these recent episodes, in some way or other, it comes up, whether it's in relationship to the class and the state, class and the party.
Yeah.
Sort of class in history, kind of thing. Class and its relationship to the mode of production, kind of thing. Class and how it might, or a class as an agent and how it might be organized, or how it might be either empowered or overruled by a government project like Project Cybersyn.
Sure.
I think. I mean, I suppose very quickly, anybody didn't listen to that episode, doesn't necessarily recall. Putnam basically suggests that scientists, rather than what was he called, the sort of his opponent, the foil of that,
Karl Popper?
rather than Karl Popper.
Whenever you need to say that, tell me, because I love saying that name.
Hilary Putnam disagrees vehemently with Karl Popper's idea that what scientists do is attempt to falsify their own theories. Rather, Hilary Putnam sort of like preempted the language of the paradigm that was sort of put forward later by Thomas Kuhn, kind of thing, suggesting a period of time when certain ideas were dominant and they sort of like dominate intellectual life, and scientists sort of take them almost nominally, axiomatically, I suppose, or they know that they're working with a certain set of theories and only test certain elements of those theories and not the entire theory's truthfulness in its entirety. But what was more interesting, I think, from our standpoint, was he proposed the idea that quite a lot of scientific theories are not predictive in and of themselves.
Sure.
They're sort of like the structure of their sort of logical format or what have you doesn't actually result in any like theoretical or any it doesn't sort of like directly lead to any conclusions that we might make. It's only when you take these theories and combine them with sort of like a series of what he calls auxiliary statements, which are like sort of like situational applications for a theory kind of thing. And it's not. I mean, it's not our idea. I stole it from someone else. The book I was reading.
Yeah, we could claim it.
To the suggestion is that, or the idea is that, in a lot of ways, this sort of like terminology applies quite heavily to Marx, in terms of like. You might say that Marx had a series of sort of theoretical laws, either economic laws or historic laws or what have you, and then supplemented those sort of like axiomatic statements with historical and economic analysis in order to apply them to different times, kind of thing. And to make them apply to different times, you might need different auxiliary statements to sort of supplement your theories, kind of thing.
Yeah, and if I can just interject for 1 second, I think it's interesting that when you just take, like, what you're saying, if you just take those original theories as, like, law, and you don't apply them using auxiliary statements or anything like that, you get stuff like the base and superstructure, like exaggerations, right? Where you get people who just believe, I guess you get like economic determinism, or you get determinism of some kind, right? So that's like the example, right, that we were working with Marx making the auxiliary statements was something along the lines of the Irish workers in England, and how that, how class also affects this idea of like economic determinism, and the basis and a set as you think, and the superstructure is built on many different things. So if you just take those theories, I suppose is what I'm saying, as dogma, then you run into a bit of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it would be bold of us to say that some of the people that we have nominally criticised under the guidance of other people who we've read and decided that we like.
yeah, exactly.
You could certainly like. But be overly simplistic, perhaps, and say that some of the criticisms that we came across last week of like structuralist thinking could, I suppose, be, I guess, perhaps result from a very sort of like strict interpretation of the initial texts without the sort of like
absolutely
supplementary development.
See our Althusser episode.
Yeah,
perhaps.
Yeah. Have to explore that idea a bit more. I think a more concrete example that we can stand by is the idea that quite often sort of what passes for Marxism might be something that was kind of it was laid down in a sort of pseudo doctrinaire way, and then has become doctrine over time. When it was actually offered up as theory, it was only for a historically specific case kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I suppose we came across a good example of that when we were reading Miliband on the party and class, and how the model of the sort of like democratically centralist organizational form that was proposed by Lenin for the Social Democrat Party of Russia
Exactly.
sort of became, or in some instances has become a sort of more of a doctrinaire proposition. Or more, it's almost sort of, if we were to use this typology, which I'm still trying to sort of stress test to some extent, like maybe it's possible in some people's, to some extent, that like the idea has slipped to become a law as opposed to sort of like a historically contingent sort of tactical proposition kind of thing, tactical idea. But I don't know, I guess, because like I was wondering whether we run the risk of kind of like either suggesting that there is a fully worked out schema that sort of like stems from Marx, which isn't the idea that I want to put forward kind of thing. Like obviously there's a lot of gaps in this writing, and he changes his mind all the time, and like
well, I mean, I think the best example of what you're saying is the Communist Manifesto, right? Because I mean, written explicitly for the German workers movement in the middle of the 1840s, right? Yeah. So I mean, if like obviously some good ideas in that that manifesto, but again, I mean, it's funny, right? Because you're saying this, and I kind of wonder, like, where do you draw the line? You know what I mean? Because it's like you could totally go full postmodern and just be like, I don't know, dude, working class isn't it? None of this matters. I don't care. I mean, that's not being fair to postmodernists. Maybe it is, but like. You have to, I mean, it comes down to a personal decision, right? Because it's like, unless you're just going to be working with what someone else says, which is, I mean, I guess is kind of what we're doing, but it's like, it comes down to, does it come down to your own personal experience? How you define class? How you define class struggle? I guess it kind of does. I don't know.
I mean, I suppose there is a very broad, I mean, we could just turn this into a very broad typology, right? Like, is this something that's historically contingent? Is it something that's like contingent to the entirety of this mode of production? And I suppose there is a broader kind of like, these things that are contingent to other factors that stand outside of the mode of production. Like, is there a human nature which is like true of the entirety of like human beings' existence, kind of thing?
Yeah.
So you could break it down into that sort of simpler categorization, and I think in some ways it's quite a useful. I guess it's a useful way for us to approach things, particularly if we're approaching it with the idea of like trying to work out what kind of theories are up to date and which ones aren't, where there might be gaps and where we can find other things that are sort of complementary. If they're, I don't know.
I mean, even just treating the theory as Ellen Meaksons Wood and E.P. Thompson treat the study of class, right, as something that has a temporal aspect to it, and one that's not set in stone.
Yeah, I mean, this. I mean, you've already said it, but this distinction in terms of the last 9 episodes probably would benefit us most in terms of our thinking about class, right? Like, I don't know how well we ever. I don't know how well I have successfully articulated to myself yet the centrality of class, other than to say that it is central in certain of these people's writings, right?
Sure.
It's certainly central to Ellen Meaksons Wood's reading of Thompson in terms of like class and class consciousness's relationship to historical development, and that's something that we also saw reflected in Miliband, right? That's something that Miliband holds with, like class and class conflict is the basic structure of society and the thing which sort of propels it forwards. And I guess it's central because of its centrality to how the mode of production functions, and that's that's the heart of like historical materialism, right? Like,
well, I mean,
history is made up of modes of production, and the key hallmark of those modes of production is how one class sort of exploits the labor of another class, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you're only going to want to overturn those modes of production when there is some transformation in the relationship between the classes, kind of thing.
And value. And I mean, yeah, you bring up historical materialism, and I mean, one way I think of just framing the entire Marxist project, or just any kind of socialist project at all, would be the one. I mean, I don't know, I could be wrong about this, but the one thing that seems like you could absolutely point to in a materialist way to frame your entire political thinking is ecological thought. And maybe that's kind of why we're more interested in getting into it in these next 10 episodes, is because we are at a point where, okay, well, you ask 10 Marxists how they define class, you'll get 50 answers. Ask them how to define class struggle, historical materialism, modes of production, anything like that. But I mean, we are getting to a point where the rubber has definitely already met the road in terms of the objective crisis of climate catastrophe. Mm-hmm. And I mean, perhaps that is just what should be shaping our theory. Because I mean, if you were to say what would be the best way of organizing a society where we would be able to not have soil depletion, not have complete climate catastrophe, how can we produce what we need to survive without degrading the environment completely? I think it would look a lot like socialism, obviously, right? So I mean, I don't know, maybe that's one thing that we could just use to phrase everything. Because I mean, you probably wouldn't have, presumably, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't have a class completely dominating another class for means of consumption and for means of surplus value extraction. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to know a little bit more about metabolic rift before I speak entirely to that, but I mean, creating a society where there is no metabolic rift, right, where there is no disconnect between production and between nature would be central to, I think, anything we're trying to do. I don't know. That's like the only objective thing that I can really point to as like, maybe this should be shaping everything that we do. I don't know.
You've sold me on the idea of reading some stuff about metabolic rift.
Yes. I coined that phrase. I just let everyone to know. Okay. John stole it from me. Yeah, I don't know. I guess all I'm saying is that it's, I don't know, maybe we get a little bit too into our heads about trying to have an academic description or definition of class when, I don't know, none of those things really seem like they were present in any of the great revolutions that we think about, right? I mean, obviously there were class compromises and also just like class alliances. Mm-hmm. So you're never really going to be like, oh, it's just going to be these people on one side and these people on the other side.
Yeah.
And I think somewhere Marx wrote about like how eventually, it might have been in 18th Brumaire, about how in times of crisis like this, parts of like the bourgeoisie actually do go over to the revolutionary side. But yeah, I don't know. Subjective almost. I mean, not objective, subjective, so.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Like, you can, I guess this is an example of like, I feel like I'm straying quite a long way away from the sort of core theory or law auxiliary statement distinction to some extent.
Stray,
like,
Dan.
It's all just sort of like structures some thinking, doesn't it? But I suppose I suppose the off like, it's all well and good, this kind of like I don't know whether this is a gap between the two or they're joining. It's all well and good saying that like it's only some change in the relationship between classes that will result in a change in the mode of production, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in reality, to some extent, like there is just a mass of people, and it almost feels like the idea of one class versus another sort of like you have this sort of conceptual idea and then they fall into different reliefs depending on when and how you look, to some extent.
Yeah.
And I guess perhaps our political project is not necessarily to be like, this is strictly what is this and this is strictly what is that, but this is a goal, I suppose, if we were to attempt to be like politically active or to make a significant political intervention.
Significantly political significant intervention.
Is to build some kind of coalition of peoples who are capable of enacting some kind of change.
Sure.
now we have some idea of who those coalitions of peoples are going to be, kind of thing. And I guess that's how a class analysis comes in, right? You can sort of work out who your allies might be, and also work out what the necessary connections might be, or what the plausible alliances might be. You can work out how you can make an appeal to people who might have other interests, right? Because we talked about this. There are internal to classes. There are people with massively different interests, kind of thing. Even people you could definitely designate as people who are members of the ruling class or the bourgeois class obviously have different interests, kind of thing. Or even people who you could confidently identify as members of the working class have wildly different and divergent interests at different times, kind of thing. So yeah, I don't know.
It's crazy. I mean, I'm just going through my head. I'm just thinking of like different definitions of working class that I've heard about. One that seems simplistic to the point of, like, I kind of like it, just of, like, I don't know, whatever. It's just relying on the wage form. But, I mean, like, what does that mean? That could mean, like, obviously, it's not like someone who has an investment portfolio, right? But it could be someone who, like, you don't traditionally think of as working class, who has a job that it's like, well, yeah, obviously, but they do just rely on their paycheck.
Yeah. Or the families of people who...
Sure.
Sort of the dependents of people who are direct wage earners are dependent on, like... wages to survive, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I'm just tempted to just say it's anyone who has a vested interest in the overthrow of capitalism. And I mean, that could be someone who isn't class conscious, right? And I mean, that's kind of like the tricky bit. I mean, I'm tempted to say that literally everybody except for maybe like 50 people would benefit from capitalism being overthrown. Like, even people you're like, that person's clearly not working class.
It's true, yeah, but it depends on what kind of timescales, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, sure.
If it's like now or like 23rd century Star Trek, like
true.
whatever, whether that's communism or not is another question. But like,
no.
but like, there are certain people who would benefit from living in a communist society who were in a worse off state in like 1921 in Russia than they were in 1914 in Russia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, George de Morinchel, perhaps. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other definitions of working class. I don't know. Can you think of any just off the top of your head?
I suppose you can start in different places, right? You could start with an analysis of how capitalism works, and then say, well, you could go to those definitions which fixate on specific professions, or like there is a reason why the industrial worker became so central, right? Because there was this idea that like they're collected together in large factories, and they're sort of almost being trained for socialism, kind of thing, by the mode of production. The
not
sort of
potatoes.
like proverbial like collective worker that they'd become. But I don't know whether that's like looking at a certain section of the working class, or whether you're saying, right, that's the working class, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or I guess it depends how you break down your analysis of.
I mean, yeah, if we're using that time frame, then I would feel like the peasant class, again, like vital to like some kind of socialist revolution, right? I mean, but again, that isn't necessarily someone who's being trained for socialism. I don't know if that matters. At least not like right now, or right here. I can't think of many peasants outside of ourselves.
But yeah, also yeah, I'm going under that definition, like how collectively peasants work. They live as certain collectives, but also that I suppose it depends how your peasant society is structured, and it also depends whether your peasants are living under capitalism or living under like living under a different mode of production, or even like some kind of hybrid, right? Like, I mean, during the transition, there were like capitalist and feudal relations that exist at the same time. Yeah. Don't know whether there are any feudal relations that still exist in the world now.
Never know. Company towns.
What the existence of like Chinese peasants is like, such that they exist now.
Yeah, sure.
They're not peasants, are they? They're just like farm laborers, basically. I would imagine. I really don't know.
Yeah.
I speak totally out of turn.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, could you just say someone whose the surplus value that they create is being appropriated? Because I feel like that is, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like that's a much broader definition. Because could you consider like a lawyer to be someone whose surplus value is being created? Like, how do you apply that to like a civil servant? How do you apply that to like...
Yeah, I guess you can look at the relationship to, like people can fulfill different professions, and it can be structured in a different way, right? Like, a lawyer who's paid a huge wage could still be being like exploited in that they're making more value for the law firm that they work for than But then I guess like a private lawyer is, I suppose, a petty bourgeois in a different sense, kind of thing,
Yeah.
or like. I don't know how many people are at the top of law firms who are still functioning as lawyers, but
Yeah.
like
Dan
they're
and
sort
I-
of like functionally ruling class, or sort of
Yeah, sure.
they're the
Capital to
they're
invest.
they're the exploiters of a whole series of people underneath,
Yeah.
and then like I don't know how many people draw wages, but also like benefit from exploitation in another way, kind of thing.
We'll consider ambulance chasers to be working class because we like them. They're pretty cool. They're funny. Yeah, so I mean, oh god, should we tie back, I guess, just to the auxiliary statement to attempt to kind of have some sort of theories to go along? I mean, right, like if we're trying to apply all of these ideas that we came to in the last 10, 9 episodes, whatever, to now, obviously, what was the most recent text? I don't know, Ellen Meakson's Wood, maybe?
Yeah.
Would that have been like 10, 15 years ago? I suppose maybe.
Oh,
a bit
most
more.
recent. I don't think you remember which one did we read
Oh.
most recently.
When did we read that?
I mean, Jack,
15
it was
years
last
ago?
week. Come on. You mean in terms of like
When
when
it
they
was
were
written.
written or events?
Yeah.
I mean, Eden Medina was written in 2015
Oh,
or
Eden Medina,
2011.
that's right. Yeah.
Um,
But yeah, I suppose.
People's Republic came out in
history.
2017 or something.
That's true. Oh my God, there are so many that are so recent. I suppose,
So
yeah.
many great things that we've read.
That's too many. I've just been thinking.
We've gotten so in the habit, and we enjoy so much reading texts from the 1970s, just so that we can say over and over again, "This is a text from X date, and
Exactly.
it's dated in these ways."
Which
It's a
episode
good
was
cop
it?
out for us.
It is. Which episode was it that I claimed to have become a Maoist? Was that the?
There was the part, the one where you
Ralph
accused
Miliband?
me of being a Stalinist.
That's true.
Yeah, that was the party in class one, wasn't it?
Yeah. So the dialectic here being resolved finally.
Okay, good. Yeah.
But yeah, so I suppose if we're attempting to apply the name of the show in any way to like what we're reading, I think I did really get a lot. I mean, I'm gonna be kind of saying this again, but from the E.P. Thompson and Ellen Meakson's Wood idea of, I'm gonna kind of take this away from kind of just solely the study of class, but in any discipline that you're working with, and this ties into the Hillary Putnam, in anything that you're working with, you do have to understand that you are part of a process of learning and understanding, and that ideas that perhaps were valid once, you have to really attempt to even just maybe like tweak a little bit to apply to the current day or anything like that. Again, like adding that temporal aspect, whether it's to the study of classes, applying it, creating like a historical process for that. But I think that that's something that I'm going to really be trying to keep in mind going forward and try and be a little bit less like, I don't know, maybe like dogmatic on certain things, or like, it's like the Marxist-Leninist thing, right? It's like you're still calling yourself a Marxist-Leninist. It's like, all right. I don't know what to say. Yeah,
It's a magical power. These words have magical power.
Exactly. Magic. Anything else to say on the auxiliary statement?
I actually wrote some things down.
Oh my
in the
God.
kind of like mind map format.
Whoa.
I don't know whether it's got anything there. Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to say no.
All right. I will say, to finish that off, I'm interested to see where we kind of came close to having a little bit of like a bit of a breakdown in the Ellen Meakson's Wood questioning everything episode. Interested to see when that happens next. Interested to see perhaps when I begin to really question Maoism as the one true philosophy. I did think it was interesting reading People's Republic of Walmart as kind of like that bridge between Meakson's Wood and Miliband on one end, and maybe like Stafford Beer, the VSM, all of that on the other, the Eden Medina, because it really kind of attempted to bridge and answer the questions of like science as it relates to class and technocracy, right? And as socialists, obviously, we would like to see something resembling a planned economy so that nothing, that as little as possible falls apart in the near future. But I mean, it was good to read a text where they at least attempted to answer how that wouldn't turn into a antagonistic relationship between just another type of class and the people kind of like maybe creating value. I guess kind of attempted to be answered as well in the Cybernetic Revolutionaries. We'll never kind of know how that would have turned out, obviously. But yeah, that question of technocracy is one that I've been really thinking about a lot, top down versus bottom up. Again, I still have the SM brain, so I'm still really thinking about like the relationship between democratically organized workplaces as the answer to that question, as one that can't really democratically organizing your workplaces so that it would then be impossible for some kind of authoritarian top-down system to apply itself. I don't know if that's actually possible. It's a nice thought, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me anyway, both the Medina reading and the People's Republic of Walmart, they both sought to make possible the idea that you could sort of plan democratically, kind of thing. But I suppose, yeah, for me, from the standpoint of the kind of like, well, I guess I've been struggling with something which sort of stems from the reading about a party and class to some extent, although it implied in both of these contexts as well. Where with the in terms of those readings on sort of cybernetics and what I might generally just describe as like planning, like the sections on planning, the readings on planning seem to counterpose themselves to an idea of politics to some extent, like this is what you mean by top down, bottom up, or like technocratic versus whatever.
How to get the state to like quote unquote like wither away. Perhaps.
Sure, yeah, but also but to sort of escape the lingering idea in my head that like, well, maybe it's best described from the position of like party and class. Like, I sort of ended the party and class thinking, or with this idea that probably like a false idea that I should probably try and remove from my head, which is like there is pure class. And then there is sort of like impure implementation of either the will, which is good, like it's both implementing the will of a class if such that you can claim to be able to represent it is probably fine, or implementing the interests of a class, which might be a bit more of a dubious proposition. But like that activity of what in that reading from Miliband we might call party kind of thing. I'm trying to escape the idea that like that is somehow an impure application of a sort of like pure and idealized sort of like either desire or interest or sort of what have you. And the same I kind of feel in terms of the ideas on planning, right? Like how much was it that the program of reforms implemented by Allende, of which Project CyberSim was the most important part from our perspective, the most interesting part from our perspective, I suppose. How much were they implemented in some ways, sort of like either against or not against the working class, but sort of like either behind their backs or without their consultation? How much was it imposed rather than inspired by class action? Now that might just be like a sort of like a paradigm that's generated in my head, which is it's almost generated by our understanding of how politics functions and the world in which we live. Right, like we're so accustomed to like delegating an authority to somebody to sort of like run our affairs for us in the political front, kind of thing. But I'm sort of left with this sort of, and also, I mean, there was just a general, just in general, the image that we got of Project CyberSyn was very fixated on the sort of internal workings of the government bodies that were putting it into place, and concerned with the thoughts of the key actors. And it wasn't a reading about all of the sort of self-organization, all the conscious action that was happening in all of the various factories all over Chile, or at least that idea was reflected only occasionally, kind of thing. And I guess in a lot of cases, it's very easy to get lost in like in sort of revolutionary processes where you fixate really heavily on the sort of the key actors and sort of become abstracted from conscious action such that it exists from sort of normal people, kind of thing. And so maybe it's just for me to always look for, or for us perhaps to like find readings that are much more focused on. And maybe I would have a much better understanding, or I would have that ratio in balance, I suppose, between the sort of purity and impurity, or like I would like demystify the sort of pure idea of like class action that I have if I sort of like if we looked more at historical cases of like working class agents taking action in sort of shop floor setting. But also, I guess what's also forgotten in this is, or what I'm also forgetting in this, and what's quite often forgotten in criticisms of like political parties, I suppose, was like people who are prominent in working class political parties, not always, but quite often are working class.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I suppose that the history of socialist politics, socialist governments, is quite easily made to look like sort of intellectuals of one sort or another who are removed from the working class, making decisions for the working class that are either against their interest or at least do not have their full consent, kind of thing.
Well, I mean, I think it's fair to say.
But it may be like, to the extent that I mean, now I'm just going around in circles with topics that we just talked about in the Miliband reading, right? But like, that is the question, right? Like, how far are we willing to let those two escape one another, and what kind of like feedback mechanisms do we want to have? And I suppose maybe this is a place where you could bring back cybernetics back in, or the sort of viable system model, and like, how would you structure those relationships?
I mean, I think it's fair to say, at the very least, that Salvador Allende and Popular Unity and all of that came to power as the result of class struggle, right? I mean, like, I don't think that's a very like crazy thing to say, that all those people, they didn't just vote for them because they were like, yeah, why not? I mean, that was obviously the result of class struggle. What that's got me questioning, though, is like how many successful socialist revolutions there have been where the working class to some extent hasn't been duped in some way. And I don't mean that to say like any of these, all of these revolutions were like run by charlatans or disaster in any way like that. But I do wonder to the extent of like when you get someone like Salvador Allende or even someone like Lenin, right, where it's like, guys, we're just going to do it. Don't worry about it. We got it now. We'll take care of it. We'll deal with it. Keep doing your thing. We got it. I mean, it all does get to a certain point where the revolution happens and the class struggle brings all of this momentum to that point. And then you're kind of told at a certain point, all right, settle down now. You know what I mean? The revolution has to kind of stop. Maybe I'm sounding like a bit of a Trotskyist. I don't know. But like, I don't know. It does have me kind of questioning maybe just the form of the revolution, perhaps. And it's, there's a word for this, that it's truthiness. It's relationship between truth and the working class. I don't know if that makes sense. Again, there's a word for it. I can't think of it. But yeah, I don't know. Just kind of got me thinking about revolutions even. And about, I guess, opposed to bring that into the Miliband as well, about the relationship of politics as a tool to kind of, bring about socialism.
Yeah.
Maybe now I'm sounding like an anarchist. I'm all over the place.
I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to in the next 10 episodes to finishing the Ross Miliband book.
Yes. Yeah.
The last chapter of which is on reform and revolution.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to sort of getting into that, and also like finding other ways to tackle this question, like what is a revolutionary politics, and does it necessarily entail like revolution in the sense that we think of it, in terms of like, I don't know, wheeling your empty cannon up to the gates of the prison kind of thing.
We could build some barricades around here.
Build some barricades.
I don't know, you'd just get vaporized within an instant, but you could build some barricades. I mean, I guess that kind of gets me to think about the German Revolution, right, where that was the great disaster of this kind of halting the class struggle and being like, we got it from here, guys. Don't worry. The Social Democrats, end your silly councils, your silly Soviets, Bavaria, get out of here, stop. And trust us. You know what I mean? And I mean, again, like, how do you stop that? Because it's a game of percentages, right? Like, whatever percentage of the working class you're able to motivate and mobilize to successfully create some kind of paradigm shift in the realm of politics. I don't think that actually makes sense, but you know what I mean. A certain percentage of it will then kind of be like, all right, that's enough. I'm done. I'm too tired. I'm tired. And you know, it's starting to you get that, obviously, but again, how do you keep that going? How do you keep the energy there?
And there is another question here, which is like, the day after the revolution, what do you do, kind of thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Or like, there's certainly like it's all well and good hanging your hopes on revolution kind of thing, but you have to plan for afterwards, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you have to institute some kind of new like I don't know what Nikolai Bukharin might have called like an equilibrium kind of thing, like some new settlement has to be made kind of thing.
It's got me thinking about organization again. It's just the key issue, right? I mean, like, how do we successfully organize these movements to be self-sustaining? I don't know.
It's self-sustaining, and also like have built in the capacities to sort of like take over the running of things of the state, I suppose, or like have competent. Significantly many competent people ready to step into any voids that are opened up, kind of thing, in terms of like system functioning or state functioning or.
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, maybe those are too broad of questions to be asking. I mean, maybe it's about organization, but it's also about regionalizing and I don't know. I guess maybe just reorganizing. I mean, in a way that puts your class interests right up at the front so that you really understand. It's not like, oh, cool, now we got a different Democrat in power. You know what I mean? Now it's like, you know, how do you make it apparent where your production is coming from, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, like a good revolutionary politics would be to make it clear, or to be a political actor on the side of revolution would be to make it clear that you are for the sort of like for a fundamental break with the way things function.
Yeah, and why those are bad.
And I guess how people know that, or like
well, I mean, how do you hopefully do that before it isn't just blatantly obvious and killing people, right? In terms of the environment or in terms of absolute capitalist collapse. Because I like to think that you could do it before that, but I don't know.
Maybe we should. I'm now back on that question you asked like earlier on, which was like, but it framed in a different way, like with the timescales of the environment, till collapse we're witnessing, kind of thing. Is there really room for hope? This comes back to the pessimism that we were talking about last week.
This is the apocalypse question.
Alpacalypse.
The alpacalypse question. The mouth of the llama. I mean, I guess it's, what else are you going to do other than hopefully be hopeful? I mean, I think, again, it's what you said, right? Whatever episode that was, maybe last episode, about like you can live with this knowledge while still not having it be totalizing in your brain and attempting to work towards something else. Which you said.
Sounds like I could have said that.
Well done, Dan. What a great quote. I don't know. Hopefully the working class can be motivated before that complete collapse. And then if it isn't, hopefully that energy isn't siphoned off to create something worse.
Post-environmental apocalypse.
A Mad Max situation, if you will.
Yeah.
As socialists, should we be in favor of that? I don't know. It'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. No.
No Mad Max.
How do I feel about living in the Mad Max world?
I would die immediately. Someone would look at me and I'd die. I'd be like, I'm not wearing that
I'm familiar enough with Mad Max to know how it exists. I tried to watch the first movie once and I was just like, this is too corny. I can't do this.
It's too corny. I know. I don't know why
I think the only one that I've seen is the most recent one, whatever it was called.
Pretty good.
Yeah. I should watch it again. It was more spectacle and less like engageable world. Which I feel like, why are you watching Mad Max if you don't want spectacle? I don't know. Yeah, there are different types of apocalypse movies, aren't there? Where like the apocalypse is sort of a depiction of a society, of a sort of functioning society, and I don't know whether that was. It was just
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't even have a car. I'd be a disaster in the Mad Max world. One more
I
thing.
suppose, like, I don't need to get a license, do I? Like,
You'd at that point. You would not.
who is going to? I know how to drive, sort of. Nobody's going to like check my license.
Exactly.
Maybe that's the best outcome.
Yeah,
Maybe that's
this.
okay. Excellent. Excellent.
Dan's an accelerationist.
For the sake of my not having to make another attempt to pass the driving test. Roll on the Mad Max apocalypse. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There was one more thing I wanted to bring up. What was it?
Soil.
It's all about no-till.
Was it like a serious thing or like
it was a serious
like a
thing?
jokey
I forget.
Okay.
I know what it was. It's this question that kind of frustrates me a little bit with socialists, I'll say, with this idea that whatever comes next will probably just be socialism. And I kind of feel like that's obviously it's determinist, but it's also like that's obviously optimistic, but perhaps a little bit not really helpful in any way. You know what I mean? I mean, like, thinking that what comes after the capitalist mode will inevitably be socialism, I think is kind of something that I've been a little bit frustrated with, and I think it's implied in a lot of readings that are Marxist or not. And I think perhaps one that we should attempt to move away from, if for no other reason than just realism. You know?
You mean being realistic?
Being realistic, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I kind of treat it as a form of accelerationism, because it's like, I don't think that's taken for granted. It shouldn't be taken for granted at all that what's going to come next is going to be socialism. One would certainly hope so.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that would be the highest form of like teleological thinking, wouldn't it? Just be like the ultimate outcome is communism, and
yeah, it's going to be perfect.
And here is the step-by-step route to it. Well, I suppose at least having a roadmap is one thing, but like assuming blindly that it's sort of definitely going to be the outcome kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it flies in the face of like a sort of like sober historical materialist reading of sort of concept understanding of history, I suppose. But also it just flies in the face of the prospect that things could get a damn sight worse.
It's true. It's very true. Very true.
Yeah, what did Marx promise? Socialism or the ruin of the condensing glasses?
Yes. Yes. Oh, God. Barbarism, I don't know if it depends on what it looks like. If it looks like Conan, maybe I'm okay with that. If it looks like Mad Max, I don't think I'm okay with that. Although, again, in Conan's world, I would be killed immediately.
Socialism or Conan the Barbarian.
Sure, Conan the Barbarian, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a nice thought. That's lovely. Is there a text we haven't talked about? Or one that we've perhaps given short shrift on? I don't think so. Should we bestow our favorite text of the last 9 upon the royal listener?
Oh, okay.
Or maybe not favorite,
sure.
Just so we don't make like a value judgment, but like, it was a good one. I mean, I feel like last time perhaps I did the same thing where I just said the most recent one.
I think I perhaps enjoyed the first episode. I mean, I thought both of them were good. The first episode that we did that was based on Nina and Medina's Cybernetic Revolutionaries was very impactful on me, mostly for the introduction to cybernetic theory that it gave.
Sure.
Because I'd made minimal sort of attempts to engage with it, but it was partial, but it was very clear and concise, and just sort of the theoretical terminology was very useful for me to get to grips with, kind of thing, and sort of start to understand some of this terminology.
For sure.
Understand the viable system model, understand sort of like the idea of a black box and how to sort of incorporate it into thinking. Like something that we didn't talk about in that episode, but that I was similarly similarly interesting to learn about was the law of requisite variety.
Oh yeah, sure.
Which is a piece of terminology that I come across a bunch of times and not really like. It was nice to have that as an answer to like cybernetics. A sort of like science of control sounds really sort of like sounds really dictatorial or despotic and sort of like science of control. But the idea that control is diversity.
Yeah, exactly.
The way that you answer diversity is with greater diversity.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a nice piece of sort of theoretical.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just by virtue of that introduction to cybernetics, it's hard to get yourself into reading about something called complex systems theory because it's like, I'm never going to look that up. Come on. But yeah, absolutely fantastic. A great intro on all those ideas. Not as complicated as you think as well. I mean, I'm sure you could get into the actual complex nature of it all. But these are ideas that can be explained to anybody. And you would go, oh, yeah, why isn't this just being done everywhere? So your pick, Eve Medina.
That's my pick.
Excellent. I like that pick. I had a hard time with the Ellen Neeson's Wood on my first read through, but perhaps I might actually give that the honor of one of my favorite readings of these past 10, just because introducing that idea, I've mentioned this before, but I really do have a hard time with some of like the more academic and I just kind of see it as like gatekeepy, but also just like almost posh, like bordering on like out of touch nature of a lot of academic study. And I perhaps had a little bit of trouble with Ellen Neeson's Wood because of that. But once I understood what she was saying and what E.P. Thompson's ideas were, it got rid of a lot of those ideas about Marxism for me, because it introduced ideas where it's like, if you come across anyone who, you know, really attempts to like have a strict interpretation of a specific theory, they're kind of jokers, because you need to introduce some sort of flexibility to your ideas. And maybe that wasn't the main idea behind that reading, but that's definitely what I took from it the most. So I really enjoyed that reading. I would also like to give an honorable mention to People's Republic of Walmart, because I read that, Daniel lent it to me a while ago, a long time ago now, and that was the first introduction I really had to the planning side of socialism, and got an incredible amount from that and the things that made me read afterwards.
I think that was my favorite episode that we did.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah.
Oh, memories.
In terms of, I mean, I don't know. Should we play favorites? In terms of just that sort of flow and dynamic, my listening back to it, I was like, oh, this is all right. This feels quite listenable. I mean, like, who am I to say? Who am I to say?
The one making them.
Yeah, I suppose so. At the coalface.
Exactly.
Podcast
coalface.
I might. How about another honourable mention? Another. I'm waving my hand as if to suggest I'm about to bow.
Oh wow.
Thank you again, Comrade Tom O'Brien.
Oh, of course, we didn't mention that. Comrade Tom. And again, we'll thank him for that episode. We'll thank him for being the know-it-all in the comments of our Capital Reading series. That is actually very appreciated.
We intend to count on you continuing to be the know-it-all in the comments.
Please God. Please. Great. That, my favorite episode, of course. Very, very good. What was your favorite, this is the real question, best Star Trek episode of these last 10 weeks? Because for me, easy, although now I'm blanking on the name of it, Timescape, I believe that's the name of it. Best Next Generation episode of all time is the one where it just blows up continuously. Bought it up on another episode. It's something like that. Whatever, I bring it up on
Arrow?
No, it's Timescape. I don't think.
Maybe that's a different episode.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever it is, the one where it keeps blowing up. So good. That gets the Jack Beverly. Just said my last name. That gets the Jack. That gets the Jack.
I mean,
badge.
you linked your Twitter to
Oh yeah, I
auxiliary
have.
statements.
Haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Has that gotten you any
Undo
Twitter
the
followers?
One.
Congratulations to them.
Yes, thank you very much.
Um,
That's my episode of these past 10 weeks.
all right. I don't know. I'll come back to it in a minute. I was reading an article today about how Robin Williams was initially meant to be in an episode of Next Generation.
Oof.
I think season 5, episode 9. He was meant. I don't remember this episode or the description of it. He was meant. Apparently, there is an episode where like somebody comes from the future claiming to be a time traveler, but actually they are a time traveler, but actually they're the twist that was ruined. I must have watched it before. I don't remember. I intend to watch it again. The twist that was ruined for me in the article, and now I'm going to ruin for you, is that actually he's from the past, who's stolen a piece of time travel technology and is attempting to collect collect technology to take back to the past to sort of like win his fortune. Anyway,
It sounds like a hero.
this character was meant to be played by
Robin
Williams, by Robbie Williams, but alas, it could not be, and I assume it's played by someone else. I'm going to go and check out that episode after this.
Can I just say that the best celebrity cameo in Star Trek is when Kelsey Grammer is just on it for like 5 seconds at the end of that episode where is it the one where the Enterprise keeps blowing up and it's because the ship keeps going into them from the past or whatever?
Yeah.
And he's like, what the hell are you doing in my way? And they're like, it's 500 years later. And then the episode ends. It's like, why was that Kelsey Grammer? It's like, that was unnecessary.
There is an episode of Star Trek Voyager that has Tom Morello in it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's a long and very awkward, although very funny and fun interaction he has with because I think it's an episode where they're following some people who are just like schmucks on the Voyager kind of thing, like not main cast characters, like just some people. And then Catherine Janeway goes looking for them, and she's wandering about the sort of like one of the cells on the thing looking for whoever, and runs into Tom Morello.
She's like, Tom Morello? She's like, whoa.
Tom Morello is also in a Star Trek movie, the one with
Tom Hardy?
No. Insurrections.
Oh, really?
You know the aliens that having to keep having their like skin on their face like taken off and regrafted back on. He plays like an extra one of those in the background, but he's got all the guns on, so you don't know.
Oh, interesting.
I remember really enjoying his cameo in Voyager, and I'm going to have to go back and watch it to see why. I think it's because there is a knowing look in both. There's a very strange fourth wall breaking moment where like they both he does a good job of acting, but also like there's a weird kind of like
buy my new album.
Wink, wink, yeah.
It's like when Stephen Colbert was in one of the Hobbits or something, and they pan past him, and it's like, that's just Colbert. Come on. Like I need another reason to hate these movies.
Yeah. To hate Stephen Colbert.
No, I don't hate Stephen Colbert. It's just like, and come on, that's Stephen Colbert. It's not like a guy.
Yeah.
Like,
it's really
that's Colbert.
Okay, I understand. Like it's really fourth wall breaking. But those Hobbit movies were an extended experience of fourth wall breaking.
Can we make a promise?
It had Billy Connolly. In it.
That's true.
Can
we make a promise to never talk about those movies on the show again?
Scout's honor.
Dwarves, I hate to say it, they just don't marry elves. I hate to say it. I'm sorry. That's not a very progressive thing of me to say, but that just doesn't happen. I'm sorry. It doesn't happen. Moving on.
Okay, folks, we're putting a line under it.
Yeah.
Apparently dwarves don't marry elves.
Dwarves do not marry elves. That makes no sense. Interspecies relationships have only happened 3 times, Dan. They've been very important, and it's only ever been humans and elves. I'm sorry. They've been epoch-defining. That was not epoch-defining. That was just Peter Jackson being like, why not? Oh, my God.
Okay.
What was the question? What was your favorite Star Trek episode? This is why we're not talking about the Hobbit movies.
I can't remember.
How about the Tom Morello episode?
Sorted. I've been watching Enterprise.
Really?
Yeah.
How's that?
I've watched bits of it in the past. What I never realised is that like quite how like totally out of their depth the crew in general and Archer in particular are depicted as being. Like, I mean, it's meant to be like we do not have like any of the. We don't have the Prime Directive. We don't have any of the regulations on how to be we don't know. We haven't yet learned how to be like stuck up our arse like the card kind of thing. Like, but it's almost like that. He's almost like clownish. This is Jonathan Archer, like clownishly arrogant and kind of like. I don't know. I've not worked out whether I like it or not yet.
I think you like it.
That feature. Enterprise always surprises me. I always enjoy it more than I remember.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'm also probably the only person in the world who is willing to defend the very corny sort of intro music that Enterprise was given. But
cue that right now. I think it sounded pretty good.
I don't know. Wait till you listen to it.
Oh, okay. A little ADR.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't know. What a 10 episodes it has been. So many people to thank, so many fans to thank, our millions of listeners. Really only one person to thank, and that's Tom, and we've thanked him. So no more thanking.
Yeah.
It will be done.
No, thank you.
Oh,
for listening.
Of
Thank you,
course.
Jack. But
thank you.
also, thank
Dan.
you, the listener.
The royal listener. Thank you very much.
Thank yous all over the place.
Yeah, nice. Next 10 episodes, they're going to be the best yet.
Yeah.
We've got some
huge
things planned. We don't.
Shh.
One thing we should mention.
It's a teleological podcast. Like it extends toward utopia.
Exactly.
Like,
it's going to be huge.
One step at a time.
If you've listened this far,
like the toolbox of knowledge, we're just
adding to. We're getting to that totality, that singularity of knowledge, where it all get uploaded to a computer. If you've listened this far, we should tell you, and it's not up yet, so I'm just going to say it to make ourselves do it. We have put together an explainer for the viable systems model on our YouTube page. You can go and check it out. It's a very cursory introduction to Stafford Beer's idea of the viable systems model, and it attempts to kind of give background to his ideas and to explain how they could potentially be used by you, the royal listener, in your workplaces, or maybe if you want to start a political party. I'm just saying, you could use these ideas. You could use that
even
ideas
your
for
podcast.
anything. Even your podcast. Yeah, exactly. Oh, God. So go check it out. Just, I don't know, YouTube auxiliary statements. You don't need me to spell it out. You're smart. You can figure it out. Viable systems model. If you wanted to know more about it, there should be some links there for more in-depth studies of the viable systems model. And it's great. It's fantastic. Send it to people who are trying to organize, hopefully. Please.
Like, share, subscribe.
Like, share, and subscribe. Rate 5 stars. And it has been said that Dan sounds like a professor. Check it out.
A very kind.
Yeah. Imagine if you're mean.
Oh no! I mean,
Oh, I see.
The
I see what you're
person. Yeah, I'm sure I
professor.
come across as a very kind professor. But there's also a very kind
Of guy.
promotion
yeah, exactly.
received.
Yeah, so that's cool. I don't know, nothing else.
Jack released a new adjunct statements.
I did. There's a new one
It's
out.
excellent. I listened
Thank
to
you
it
so
today.
much. Did you? Oh, thank you.
The audience should go listen to it right now if they haven't done it yet.
Yes, go.
Or not.
Don't really.
What was it about?
It was about a book that friend of the show, Ed, lent to me, and it is Alan Moore's Voice of the Fire, and attempting to come to terms with his ideas. Alan Moore, an anarchist. Alan Moore, a magician. What does that mean? And altogether, just a cool book. I just talk about it. I don't know. It's neat. It's dark, though. That's the only thing. It's a lot darker than the Silver.
Yeah, I was listening. I was like, oh, okay.
Like, whoa,
The
Jack,
story
right?
took a turn.
Hey, buddy, whoa. Yeah, if you have a trigger warning for children being burned at the stake, I'll say that.
And also, where's he from?
Who? Alan Moore?
Yeah.
Northampton?
Northampton. Trigger warning for Northampton.
Trigger warning for Northampton, definitely. I kind of want to go there, but I feel like if I go there, I'd just be like, this is like every other British town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where the fuck is Alan Moore?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No other housekeeping. I will say, Dan, really enjoyed these last episodes. Well done to us, I think. I've had a blast. Really looking forward to doing some more. That's really great.
Thank you, Jack. It's also a pleasure for me.
Yes. Absolutely.
You've been listening to Auxiliary Statements. I'm Dan.
And I am Jack. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
The music you heard this episode was Music to Kill Bad People To by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. If you like this song, you can check it out and much, much more on their Bandcamp at kinggizzard.bandcamp.com. Be sure and follow us up on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you like what you heard, be sure and tune in next week for some more commie discussion. Till next time.